Old Zach's getting ready to be a snowbird.
Yeah, I'm gonna head on out and get out of this cold weather, man.
I don't blame you. I like to go with you.
I think the lowest it's going to be down there is like 49, 50 degrees at night. And then during the day, a few days 74, some days 72, 71, a few days upper 60s. I can handle that.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello, Anthony.
Wow, with only 3 of us, it's going to be a really short meeting.
Yeah.
I'm sure the others will join right at the end.
I'm sure they will too.
Mm-hmm.
Is it cold over there in Ward 1?
Inside the house, it's nice and warm.
Yeah. I'm already tired of winter.
And we haven't had it yet.
I know. It's been nice, hasn't it? Until now.
It's going to get warmer later on this week a little bit, but not like.
But then turn around, they said.
Yeah, it's going to get cold over Christmas. But no white Christmas. We haven't had much snow. We need some precipitation, really.
Yeah, we need some moisture, but I just don't want that S word.
I hate the I word even more.
The ice, yeah, that's
weird. Yeah, right. Yeah, me too.
We got a 4-wheel drive in the snow. We can go pretty easy.
Oh, is your car 4-wheel drive?
It's all-wheel drive for the Toyota RAV. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it runs pretty good in the snow.
You ever tried driving down there to her folks' place?
That'd be like a 2.5, 3-day drive.
Yeah.
Burn so many days driving down there. I guess right now the land crossings are restricted.
Yeah.
There is no problem, but the land is restricted.
Don't make much sense, does it?
I'm dreading wearing the mask though all day,
I seen you work to your folks' house.
I wore, of course, with my parents,
Yeah.
We went over there and had barbecue, and we sat at one table and they sat at another, like a bar area, and we, ate and had a few margaritas and watched the Chiefs game.
Well, if we go to our grandkids, we'll wear a mask there too. They've had it before, so we probably won't go.
Mm-hmm.
The virus could still be in their house.
The ladies that were taking us to the airport, she had it about a month ago, and she was cleared like on Thanksgiving after her quarantine, and she's been fine. Didn't really have much. Still gets tired every once in a while. So.
My grandson had it. He said he lost his taste. He couldn't taste stuff.
Lose your taste and smell. That's what my niece said. Yeah. Yeah.
Had a metallic thing. Yeah.
I'm glad we're going to have the doctor on tonight to talk about, Dr. Righteous, about what's going on in the North Kansas City Hospital. So.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, it's almost time.
Yeah. Hi, Lisa.
I always mute myself right away so I don't forget.
Well, it's 6 o'clock. Shall we call this meeting to order? Notice of an open work session to the City Council of the City of North Kansas City, Missouri, December the 15th, 2020. Eric? Thank you, sir. So back on September 22nd, the City Council had a special meeting on the Armor Road Complete Street Improvements Project to determine what the course of the project would be, and made a determination to continue the project, but to make certain specific modifications, and it asked staff to come back with suggestions for those modifications. So that is the purpose of this work session tonight, is to consider some of the suggestions that our engineer, WSP, and staff have come up with, and see if we can't get some direction from council. We recognize, by the way, that there's a lot to chew on in the staff memo, a lot of different elements to discuss. And so as you consider this tonight, one idea that we have might be that you could, if you like, maybe have a second work session on January 5th to further consider some of these if you're not able to get through everything in an hour tonight. So that's just for your consideration. And with that, I will turn it over to the Community Development Director, Sarah Copeland.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We also have with us tonight Jay Aber, who is the consulting engineer for this project from WSP. We do have a presentation to start with, just to give you all an overview of the options in the 7 items that you all asked us to take a look at. So if we could start that, Kim, thank you. You can go to the next slide. Shows the list of the 7 items that council asked us to evaluate at the virtual town hall on September 22nd. What we would like to do is just to give you a brief overview of these 7 items and the options related to each of them. And then after that quick overview, have you give us some direction on each of these. Our hope is that if you have questions, then we can answer them. And I'll start with the first few because they're a little bit more straightforward. And then Jay will take over towards the end when we get into replacing the delineators and the Howell iron traffic queuing. You can go to the next slide. We just want to show you what each of these options would entail as part of the overview, starting with the geometric changes to the street. One of the concerns was the turning radius at the post office drop boxes. So one option to adjust that would just be adjusting the pavement markings so that instead of lining up at 90 degrees with those driveway entrances, it would be at more of an angle for people turning right into that driveway to make that a little less of a sharp turn. The next slide shows the turning radii at Iron Street. These changes could also be carried over to all other intersections along the corridor where we might install any of these curb islands. You can see in the very faint gray underneath the existing islands at this intersection. These were designed to accommodate turning buses, but could be modified to use a more sloped nose on the island. If you go to the next slide, this shows an example of what that would look like, where the curb slopes down towards the street so that if someone did hit this with their wheels, it would not be as jarring to the car and would pull the noses back a little bit to provide more space there at the intersections. The next slide shows the third geometric change, which would be the right turn lane at Fayette. This would replace 2 places where we have buffer areas currently for westbound traffic. To make that right turn lane, we would pull the bicycle lane between the through lane and the right turn lane. This would require adding some protection to the buffer area between the 2 driveways. This would be important for 2 reasons. One is that we don't want cars to merge over into that space too quickly, partly because there's a bus stop immediately to the east, and we want to protect the bus stop operations. And secondly, because that minimizes the conflict between the bike lane and the cars merging into the right turn lane. The next slide shows the 4th item. These are these next three are the non-geometric changes to the roadway. The first concerns the concern about the height of the grasses that were planted in the landscaped curb islands. The next slide here shows 4 possible options for revising that to lower plantings, 3 flowering plants, and 1 other grass that just are shorter at their mature height. The next slide shows 2 options about bike lane visibility. One option would be to paint the entire bike lane green, which is shown in the next slide, where we would go, what we priced out in the memo was to provide green markings from Lynn to Fayette. That is a more expensive option than the next slide, which shows just marking conflict areas along the corridor. So this is mainly intersections and driveways to bring more visibility to the bike lane, just in targeted locations. The third non-geometric option is to replace the delineators. That's the next slide. We really have 2 options here. One option is to remove the delineators and not replace them. The other option is to remove them and replace them with protection in strategic locations. And in the next slide, we really have 2 different types of areas where we would provide protection. One is narrow linear areas, and the other is wider buffer areas. This shows the block between Lynn and Iron, where we have both of these. We would need narrow and linear protection on the north side of this block, and we have wider buffer areas that could use some protection on the south side. So this slide's just intended to give you an example of what we mean when we talk about narrow linear areas versus wider buffer areas. The next slide shows some other areas where we think it would be along the corridor near Gentry and at Howell, where it would be important to have some of that strategic protection if we're removing the delineators. The next slide shows examples of the narrow linear protection, which would fit along the bike lanes. Everything from pretty minor curb stops or precast concrete curbs to the bumps, which are just a more interesting looking version of those, or the proprietary product that creates the wave along those bike lanes. And the next slide shows options for wider buffer areas. We could do the curb islands that we have at the Howell Street intersection, or modular components like the spheres that have a more artistic look, modular planters, or even using limestone like that example that's in Westport across the river. The next slide then gets into the Howell Iron traffic queuing issue. And Jay, I will turn this over to you to walk through these options.
Thanks, Sarah. So you all asked us to look into the traffic operations specifically between Iron and Howell on Armour Road. And so we did some investigation, and the first thing we did was create calibrated traffic models based on actual travel times that were recorded, and then project those out, because obviously right now we have different travel patterns with the pandemic. So what we see here is travel times on the left in blue. That is the pre-pandemic traffic volume travel times. The red is current travel times, approximate, well, or I should say peak pandemic travel times. These were from traffic volumes back in June. And then the green is the projection of future travel times once the pandemic has somewhat stabilized or been eliminated. And so the main takeaway was that the traffic operations are still quite good on Armour Road and projected to be quite good. So the issue is not really traffic operations, but it is queuing between the signals. And if you go to the next slide, it's a somewhat non-intuitive of what the issue is, but really what we've seen in the field and the traffic modeling is that the primary issue is how the signals operate eastbound between Howell and Iron. And this is just a snapshot from the traffic model showing the ideal operations. And what that ideal scenario is that the eastbound signal at Iron turns green first. So any cars sitting between the intersection have a chance to drive through the intersection. And then after those cars have cleared that intersection space between the signals, then the signal at Howell would turn green. So any cars waiting there can just continue straight on through both signals. The next slide shows, though, the more unsatisfactory operations, and that's when the signal at Iron is red and the signal at Howell turns green. And in this case, there's oftentimes a queue between the signals. So cars going east at Howell have a green light, but they're seeing a line of cars in front of them and a red light in front of them, and they're not able to go. And that queuing becomes problematic as it extends through that Howell Street intersection. Now, the issue that kind of makes this a little more complex is that this isn't a function of poor operations. It's actually a function of how the side streets operate. And so on the next slide, we can see that the traffic volumes on Howell are actually significantly lower than those on Iron. And particularly for the through movements and the left turn movements, the northbound 150 cars per hour at Howell would not actually actuate that signal for north-south. Those cars can just simply make a right turn on red. So what happens is the signal is actually set up for Iron to turn green first and Howell to turn green second. But what happens is that there's no traffic northbound or southbound on Howell that's causing that light to turn green. So the Armour Road operations continue to have a green light, even though the ideal operations is to have that red until Iron turns green. But because there's more traffic on Iron, that light tends to stay red longer. So there's a couple different solutions to this. On the next slide, I think we have the different solutions. One is to simply remove the traffic signal at Howell. This is not recommended at this time. The others are a little bit technical, and that is the simplest solution would be to set the signal timing on Howell such that it stays green for a longer period of time, regardless of whether there's actual traffic going north and south on Howell. And what that does is it forces that Armour Road signal to stay red until Iron turns green, and then and then the Howell signal can turn green after that. And then the other option is that there are some different strategies you can do with signal timing where it effectively would implement that second option only when the situation occurs. But in order to do that, we would need to add some new equipment, some different detection on the signals to implement those strategies.
So those are all of the options that we put together for the 7 improvements that were requested by council back in September. We would be happy to, it's the end of the presentation also. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you all might have, or we could go back up to the top of the list and start talking through these for direction from council.
Councilmember Smith and then Councilmember Clevenger.
Okay, I've got a list of notes, but Jay, I'd like you to go back a couple slides to the picture of the 2 intersections. Can we do that really quick? Or can we put the slideshow back? There we go. Couple slides back where it should, there, that one right there. Okay. Yeah, one more, Kim. No, the 2 intersections where it's bad there. Okay. So this is the one I feel like you guys have done a good job of collecting traffic data, but we're kind of missing the point here in between the 2 intersections. It's not that the lights aren't synced up very well. As you pointed out, that it's still functioning fairly well. It's that turn lane, that left turn from eastbound Armour onto Howell. There's only space for 2 cars to queue there. And when the light turns green at Howell and at Armour and Iron, if those 2 cars can't clear, it backs straight into the traffic lane and we're done. Then it will back up to Swift, and Swift backs all the way up. So really the concern, in my opinion, and I've seen it happen a number of times, is that left turn has to be able to clear the queue before cars can keep going. So whether it's timing out, is there a dedicated, remind me, is there a dedicated left turn signal there onto northbound Iron?
No.
There's
I think
not.
so.
But if we could get something like that that would clear out that queue and not back it up onto Armour, a lot of these issues seemingly, especially at peak times, would go away. Because if you've got more than 2 cars there, used to be they could go around in the extra travel lane. They can't now, and that is jamming things up so bad during peak times. So that's that. I think that was missed in the presentation. Is that specific turn lane issue?
Yeah, Councilman Smith, you are correct. There is no eastbound protected left turn phase. So like the westbound, you get the left turn green arrow where the left turn cars are allowed to go, and then eastbound it's a red light, so you have that free left. So both at Howell and at Iron, there is no eastbound protected left turn phase. So that could certainly be added. That would be additional expense, partly for the signal itself, but also for the detection. There's, again, no signal detection to tell if there's an actual car there or not, to give it that protected left turn right now.
Okay.
All right. So I think Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, a couple of things. I'd like to go back as far as on some of the, we don't have to go back to the slide, but a couple of questions regarding some of the protections. The slide that was showing, the slim protections, the narrow barriers, it was like a little concrete triangles. What are those called?
The bumps?
Yeah, the bumps, they're like little concrete, it was like on the, I don't know if you want to go back to the slide, but those kind of caught my eye. One question that I had, yeah, go ahead and go back. Yeah, it's the ones on
one more slide.
One more back, I believe. Yeah, the one on the top right.
Top right.
Mm-hmm. What are those called?
Bumps.
Okay,
it's a highly technical term.
Okay, all right. As far as the turning radii, I just want to clarify, I guess, my understanding. When we're talking about into the post office, is that when you're going south on Knox and then turning right there into where the drop boxes are?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And as far as the Iron and Armour, the intersection, talking about the turning radii, my fear is that if we do slope some of those islands, that there may be some, they've been hit as it is right now. It looks like once or twice, but if we slope them, it may increase the speed. People turning right, going east on Armour from Iron. If you've got a cyclist or a pedestrian, that's a pretty busy intersection, and so I want to keep that as safe as we can. I know that a lot of those curbs out there in those islands, I don't see that they're painted yellow. And is that something that we've talked about doing and painting all the rest of those islands that we have, the curb at least yellow to make them more visible? And that's another question that I had. And Jesse already brought up about the Armour and Howell, so I'll leave that. That was my question, a couple questions there.
I don't think we have had any conversations about painting the curbs yellow. The one that's down by Knox, Municipal Services did paint at least part of that yellow and added a sign for people who were turning onto Armour Road from Knox to increase the visibility of that one. But we have not discussed that for other curbs along Armour Road.
Okay, maybe something to think about. I don't know how other council people feel. That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
All right. I have Councilmember Smith and then Councilmember Tull, I think, in that order.
Okay, I'll go down list kind of like Zach did. So from the top, the post office turning radii, I like smoothing that out. The bigger issue I think is that those 2 posts kind of sit there by each other, and I've even done it just this week where I was going to turn into the post office box. I got into that right area to make the turn, and then there are 2 posts right there in front of you that kind of block. So you do have to make a pretty right-hand turn, like a 90-degree. we could either discuss how we would replace those with the delineator replacement, but getting that more of a smooth transition would be great. I really like the tapered curbs there at the intersections. I think that it's a good compromise between getting rid of them versus, so there's still a visual and a physical barrier there. It's just not going to wreck somebody's tire if they clip it. I think that's a great solution that threads the needle. I've been a big proponent of the full green for a long time, but the cost is astronomical. So thanks for showing us the two options. I do think going with those conflict areas to start with, and then if we run into some issues, then we could look at what it would cost or look at doing the whole thing. With the delineators, I definitely would want to remove and replace, emphasis on both. Get rid of them, but we need something. For the narrow linear spot, if you could again pull the slide back up, there was a spot on the slide about wide buffer areas, looked like an option we didn't really talk. So if you can go one forward, there's behind the planter box, there's looks like a yellow piece of metal. That seems kind of like an attractive solution that would be visual and not, I don't know. It seems simple, so it doesn't look like it would be very expensive, not visually distracting, but it would separate the bike lane. And the planter boxes actually look pretty good too. So like that setup right there is something that I would be a fan of.
Right, so that's a product that's called Bike Rail, and it's a modular, metal that you bolt down. Actually, the attractive parts of it are that you can, it's shown as yellow there, but you can get it in almost any color. It's a powder coated metal, and in a variety of lengths, and then it attaches to things like those planter boxes. The real downside is that it's about as much as the wave delineators. It is also a proprietary product, so it is more expensive.
Is there no alternative that's not a proprietary product? Like, could we get links of metal and powder coat them? I'm sure we've got powder coating businesses here in Northtown that would be happy to do something like that.
Well, it also, they slides into those end pieces that you bolt down so that it doesn't move.
Sure.
So it would be labor intensive
to create our own.
Yeah.
Okay. I would be interested in seeing, like, because the wave is cool, but it could, it's not for everybody. I think this one has a much better visual appeal to the masses, and having it in a color that makes sense would be pretty neat. But if it costs the same, that's nuts, because it's a very simple design. It seems like we could reverse engineer it. So that's something I'd be interested in either discussing further or considering. That's all for me on this one.
Councilmember Tull.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts as well, but I was just wondering, would it be easier if we went one item at a time so we could all talk about it if we have thoughts on it?
Yeah,
we can.
If not, I'll just go through my list. I just thought, he's saying some things I agree with, something I might not, and it would be easier if maybe we just went through the list. Check.
Sure.
That would be easier for staff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want me to start off the first thing? What was the first thing?
First thing was the post office turning radius into the drop boxes.
Yeah, I understand why they put it at a 90 degree to slow you down, but it sounds like that would be an easy fix to restripe that, in my opinion. So I'll get back off till you get to the next one.
Rick, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I guess we're still on the post office. It looked like that picture was eastbound turn into it. And that's not the biggest problem. I think if you're coming down westbound, it's a very difficult turn. And it's almost not impossible, because I do it, but it's turning off a Knox and making a loop into it.
Westbound.
We shouldn't start eliminating streets that can't get into it. See, that looks like with the arrow, the way you're driving through the post office part, that means that turn is coming from the west to the east. Is that correct?
Look at the top right, Rick. That little triangle, that's what we're talking about here, coming from the east westbound, shaving that piece off.
Well, it sure don't look that way with that arrow pointing the other direction inside there. It looks like I can't see the picture. I can't frame that. To me, it looked like you're coming from. Yeah.
That's what
But anything you do to make it easier to get into there, those I've ran over them before, and not on purpose either. I don't want to scratch my truck. And there was one thing that it's not on this one, because another thing I want to bring up was never addressed. So it's still to do with the post office. That's the straight in parking, which I like it a lot better than the parallel parking out in the middle of the street. But I found a problem with that the other day. I was westbound. And the very last spot to the west was the only one open. I pulled in there, and when we got ready to leave, I can't see traffic coming. If you're the last one or anywhere close to the last one, you can't see through the other vehicles. So eventually you just got to back up and see what happens. I don't know of anything we can do about that, but it is going to be a problem, I think. I just thought I brought that up because it wasn't part of this. That's all I got on number 1 anyway. Thank you.
Councilmember, sorry, it just popped up. I'm going to say Councilmember DeLong and then Councilmember Clevenger.
Okay, no, I was just going to real quick. I'd agree pretty much general direction we're going here on the first option, or on the turn radii at the post office. I think it makes sense to narrow that down a little bit. So I'm on board with that.
Okay, Councilmember Clevenger.
Yeah, that's I was going to echo those comments on the post office. Definitely. That's why I was asking also going south on Knox and making that loop into the to the drop boxes, and for the turns, I think definitely smoothing that out would be okay and a decent compromise. So I'm on board with that one.
Anyone else on the post office? All right, so the next item, is it right turn lane at Fayette is the next item?
The next item would be the turning radii at Iron.
Oh, thank you. So does anybody have any other comments on the turning radii at Iron? Councilmember Tall.
So what is proposed is going to cost $10,000 per island, and it might be a good fix, but I don't think we should spend that $40,000 right now. We're looking at doing 3 more intersections, and doing those intersections is what's going to get rid of the delineators that are the most problematic, the ones that are at the intersection. So if we have 3 more intersections to go, why wouldn't we change the radius of that turn on our next one and see how that works out before we spend the $40,000? And maybe people don't like that either. It seems like we would be able to do the next intersection, back it up a bit. So I know the purpose is to slow down when you take that turn, but if we're trying to give up a little bit to make it easier for cars, let's just back it up a little bit on the next intersection and give it a try. Not saying that you wouldn't ever come back, but it doesn't make sense to me to throw down $40,000 on that without having tried it when we have 3 chances to try it coming up.
Mayor Stilo and then Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, you know, it seems to me like we've had 3 studies on this, and the majority of our residents and the majority of our business people are really not happy with this. You people are elected to represent your citizens, and if you don't want to do what they want you to do, I just don't understand. And I cannot, I really believe that probably in the near future, we're going to get a whole brand new council that understands it. And I think that then it's going to be time when they just junk this whole thing. I don't see any reason to throw any more money at this thing. We have, I don't know how much money we've wasted already. It's ridiculous. How many bicycles do you see going up and down Arbor? If we had people out there using it, okay. But, I drive all over this town. I see people on Swift. I see people down on the avenues and everything. I have no problem with that. But nobody goes up and down Armour Road if they've got any brains at all. I'm done.
Can I respond to that?
Go right ahead.
I have been receiving a lot of information from residents, so it's not like I'm receiving information and going against it. We do have a lot of people. It's a big hot topic. It's mainly what we discussed before getting elected, and I was just recently elected. My point is, if you're talking about throwing money away, you're throwing $40,000 at something that's already finished without knowing if you're going to like that fix. We have 3 more intersections to go. We could give it a try at the next intersection, and people aren't going to like Complete Street until it's finished because it's not connected yet. So the only way through this is forward. And I am listening to the residents, and they are speaking to me, and I did just get elected, and this was the main topic.
Councilmember Stewart, and then Councilmember Smith, and then Councilmember Clevenger. I think I had Councilmember Stewart and Smith and Clevenger.
Yeah, I was talking muted. I agree with the mayor on some parts of this. There was a way to do bicycles without messing up the road, and we didn't do it. And that was to, if we had to buy right away, fine, is create a bicycle lane up near the sidewalk lane. They've been completely off the street and safe, and we didn't do it. So as we're going down this list, I got comments on Lisa's. If we're going to start on any intersection, changing them bump outs, iron is the worst. We need to fix it, because when you're coming out of the community center, that's a tough right turn. I don't know how. I think the fire trucks should just avoid it now and go down the Lynn. But if we're going to start on any intersection, I think that's the one. Another problem with iron is that if you're southbound on iron, coming from the avenues, you just stop the red light, okay? Then the light turns green. There's times, if you want to make a left turn and go east, there's times one car, maybe 2, get through because of the traffic across, either wanting to come straight or turn right around that bump out. Now, I think the only fix for that is another minute or 2 of a green light for southbound traffic, so they can turn on to Armour. It's a mess. If you ever come up there, when the light first turns green, you'll see it. I mean, that needs to be fixed too at Iron. And Iron is the most traffic compared to the other ones you're talking about, Lisa. Howe doesn't have that much traffic compared to Iron. So I think if we're going to try a sample, I don't mind that idea. Do one intersection, see how it works. But if we do one, I think it should be Iron. I think that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith, and then Councilmember
Yeah,
Clevenger.
I saw Lisa starting to say, I think what she was going to say is we haven't done Howell yet. So when we go to do those, we could test drive it. And I really like that idea because it does save us money. Or it could save us money if we find a better fix or we try something like this and it works, then we could go back. The only reason I would say not to wait is that this intersection at Iron, as Rick put, it's pretty broken. There are those islands get hit regularly. You can see it in the planter boxes. They're, consistently missing grass on that southeast side. So I would advocate going ahead and doing these sloped pieces so that people can, have a little bit better turn radius, a little less damage on their tires. I appreciate where Lisa's going with test driving it at the next intersection, but those don't have the same amount of traffic, and it's not a current problem there. So that's my thought on it.
Member Clevenger.
As far as the armor and iron, I'm not sure if that's one that someone had mentioned before about where it does stack up trying to turn, if you're going south on iron and trying to turn east on Armor Road, maybe like a dedicated turn signal like we were talking about before. As far as the turning radii, I mean, I checked with some of the fire department people, they have people that actually drive the trucks, and some of the regular, the trucks, normal pumpers, have the smaller chassis and they don't have a problem making those turns there at Armor and Iron, going eastbound. I know that, those do get hit. I think maybe some better visibility. My concern is, since that is such a highly used intersection, especially for cyclists and pedestrians, I mean, I use it a lot going to the community center. Anytime you kind of speed up people turning there, that's my concern, is how much sloped they are, where you're going to be standing if you've got to get off the sloped area and back up further across. That's just one concern that I have with that. So I'm not really in favor, I guess, overall in sloping those right now. I mean, we can always come back to that. I wonder, with the dedicated turn, if that would help. I'm not sure, but that's my thoughts on the Armor and Iron.
Any other comments on Armor and Iron and turning radii?
Yeah.
Not sure if I'm hearing consensus yet. Councilmember DeLong?
I'm conflicted on this because I see where Lisa is coming with that. But I also know, we've been through a process here, and this is kind of where the process has brought us, is to this list. And so I think we definitely need to tackle this list, because I think this was kind of consensus of what a lot of us were hearing on the major issues still, while also making sure we're still forward looking into the future steps, and we're not pushing those too far back, because we want to make sure we accomplish those to complete the project as well, while also tackling this list. That doesn't really add to your consensus. I'm somewhere in the middle. I mean, I would be fine with either direction we decide to go. But I do think we need to make sure we're tackling this list that we have in front of us now.
Councilmember Saper. You're on mute, sir.
We have made a mess of this in so many ways. I agree with the mayor and Rick. However, and I also think that we can make some changes, and I think we can make them very incrementally, such as add iron and armor. We can do, for instance, the southeast corner and make a change there, and with one of these sloping or some other. The sloping one is a good idea. Try that. See if it improves the turn there and the traffic flow before we start doing the whole intersection or many intersections. Let's do this incrementally, because we've got a mess to clean up, and throwing money at it, well, in some ways has created the mess. We need to go slow and take it incrementally. That's
so just as a thought, if you are, again, I had made a suggestion at the very beginning that, you could, if you wanted, kind of try to work through these, talk through these, and then have some further discussion on January 5th. Perhaps this would be an item that you'd want to give some further thought on and look to perhaps give us some direction on January 5th, since it does sound like there's some difference of opinion. How does the council feel about that? Okay. Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, that would be fine. I like what Tony said there. The two east side ones are the ones I hear about. I've never heard anybody complain about the two on the west side of the intersection. The one turning that would go eastbound onto Armor, and then northbound onto Iron. The two east side pieces, those are the ones that really seem to catch people. If we wanted to go incrementally, maybe we do those two first and then see if that helps, and then we can push that forward. But yeah, let's talk about it at the next discussion.
All right, is there anything more on this item, or we can move on to the next element? So I think the next element is right turn lane at Fayette. Does anybody have any thoughts? Councilmember Tull, and then Councilmember Stewart.
I just had a question for Pat. I emailed you, Pat, but it was just today, so you haven't had time to get back to me. I was wondering about the signal box there at Fayette. And I know it had been hit a few times before the right turn lane was out. I was just wondering if you knew off the top of your head how many times, and I knew that we needed to order some parts to fix it when it had the yellow flashing light for a long time, and how much that cost. And if you can tell whether that's become less of a problem now that the right turn lane has been eliminated.
Yes, Lisa, I did return your email. Maybe something happened there.
Okay,
Well,
I'll check again.
Yeah, your questions I answered. One, in the last 8 years, we've had 2 motorists crash into the control box there for the traffic signals and totally, ruin them. And when that happened, I think both of them, one was a hit and run, and one of them was caught and inebriated. But when that happened, it cost between $25,000 and $30,000 to replace them. It took 3.5 weeks to get them from the factory, and then 2 or 3 days to install them. Both times, our insurance company paid for all but the $10,000 deductible. So over the last 8 years before that, I don't remember in my 17 years, but we had 2 in the last 8 years run into that. And it was late at night on, both of them happened to be on weekend nights, very late at night.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart, I think, and then Councilmember DeLong.
Yeah, I don't have a problem either way on a right turn into Fayette as it needed. Is there a lot of right turns on Fayette? Westbound? I don't know. I don't see a whole lot of people trying to turn right on Fayette. That's all I just comment.
Anybody else have anything on that? Councilmember DeLong, sorry.
No, since I didn't initially mention this one, I figured I'd touch on it a little bit. I think the initial plan, we took the turn lane out and we had it run along the curb there because it showed us going farther through the downtown area. And I don't see that happening anytime soon, if ever. So I think it makes sense to go ahead and bring a more natural ending to that area, which is why it asked for this. And there's kind of an unused area just the way that was created before. So I don't think there's a lot of traffic there, but it just gives people that right turn back, and I like the way this has been laid out. That's it.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Just maybe a question for Bryant. If you're talking about doing the right turn lane, are you talking about putting also maybe looking into a bike box there to allow traffic to turn left or go straight?
Yeah, that's on the schematics there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that a comment or a question?
Well, I think you just answered it. If it's on the schematics like it is showing there, that's what I'd be okay with that if we have that kind of protection, that bike box or what they call it.
And I'd agree that definitely gives the riders some visibility as well. They're able to get in there and get into that left turn, or get able to at least have a lead on traffic there. So I mean, I think there is some added benefit there to add that to the end of the lane. That's it.
Councilmember Saper.
One advantage of having the right turn lane there reactivated is that it'll reduce some of the queuing that occurs when the right people wanting to make a right turn have to wait in that single lane to make that turn. And if they can make that right turn, it would free up another spot or 2 or 3 on the westbound side.
Is there anything else on this? So again, I mean, we may come back to you January 5th and get you to give us a hard up or down. It sounds like there might be some consensus to move forward with this item, if I'm hearing correctly. If there's nothing else, perhaps we move on to discuss landscaping, island landscaping. Anybody have any thoughts on replacements for the current landscaping? Councilmember Stewart?
I think they look nice. Just anything short, I'd go with. I mean, you don't want to get something you can't see over, like the problem with is that called native grass, whatever it is. We just need something closer to the ground. Other than that, I don't have any problem with it.
Councilmember Saper, and then Councilmember DeLong.
Is there any possibility of simply regularly cutting that back to a reasonable height rather than taking it out and going to that expense?
Sarah, I don't know if that's anything that we've talked about. Do you have any thoughts about that?
We haven't talked about it. I suppose we could. The issue is that it would then be constant maintenance. So one of the goals in the original design was to not put in something that would require a lot of work from municipal services.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I think trying to keep it cut, which I wouldn't care, but I think when you add the labor cost to that, it's going to be cheaper to replace it. I doubt that grass is too expensive. I don't know.
So does anybody have any particular preferences in terms of landscaping that we've presented to you as a replacement? Councilmember DeLong?
No, I mean, I was just going to say overall, I think that the next steps look like the right way to go. Just consulting with municipal service. I mean, what goes in there, I don't. As long as it's what it is now, that's all I have.
Okay, Councilmember Toll and then Councilmember Smith.
I love the grass. I think it looks great, but I understand the issue with sight lines, and I do appreciate that all the options you put in this write-up are all native plants, just like the grass, which should make it very low maintenance. So I like it. All your options.
Councilmember Smith?
Low, colorful, low maintenance. I mean, just something easy. You're the professional, so like we'll trust your judgment.
Okay.
But the consensus is to replace the taller feather grass.
Yeah.
Yes.
I do think I'm hearing that. All right. We'll come up with something. All right. The next item, bike lane visibility, I believe. Any comments? Councilmember Smith, you earlier indicated that you like the solid green all the way down, but it's kind of expensive. Councilmember DeLong.
I think, yeah, as Councilmember Smith kind of tackled it earlier, really hitting at those conflict points is the way I think we should go after this one, because I mean that is a big cost difference, in really where we want the most awareness is where there's potential for conflict. So I would agree with just going at the conflict points only.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Just want to agree on that. I mean, it'd be great if we could paint it all, but it's a very high cost. Conflict zones I'm good with that as well.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. We actually did try to put these together in terms of the easiest to resolve, and towards the end the hardest to resolve. So the next item is delineators. And we are wondering what your thoughts are about that. Councilmember Tall.
I think Rick was before me. Go ahead, Rick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I may be in the wrong spot anyway. I got comments about what they called the bumps. Are we there?
Yes, sir.
I don't favor anything low enough that you're going to run over. If you're going to put anything, it's have it up at least high enough that people can see them. I think them bumps look like they could be easy to run over. I don't think they'd be good on my truck. That's it.
I was going to say kind of what I had said before, which is to get rid of the delineators in the intersection, which I think are visually really very clutter and it's difficult to see where your car goes, that you need to move forward with the plan and do those intersections, would get rid of all of those delineators. And as far as the line delineators in between next to the edge, and you had the 4 options, it seemed to me that the pre-cut curb is something that's easily accessible, it's affordable, you could paint it if you wanted to, and it would really protect cyclists. So I would say to get rid of delineators, complete the intersection, and use the precast curbs.
Councilmember Clark?
I'm in agreement with that. The precast curbs are a nice kind of in-between affordable option. I know they're a bit low, but I think that there's something that if we decided down the line we wanted to replace in some way, that's something that could actually be used somewhere else. And they do allow for water flow and things like that in between the two for like snow removal. And also, yeah, to Lisa's point of kind of looking at not only hitting the checkbox for the immediate at Iron of replacing and modifying the curb there, but also that is the benefit of maybe looking at another intersection, is because we're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone by eliminating those delineators. The most confusing areas for those delineators exist. So that's my thoughts on that.
Councilmember DeLong?
So I do kind of worry sometimes you look at some of these pictures, and I know there's 1,000 examples out there, but just looking at these, you do some of these, you still end up with some delineators on there. So if we went with the precast curves, would we anticipate, I almost even hate saying, putting delineators up with them, or how do we think that would work? And I don't know who that question would be for, either Jay or Sarah.
Right. So we're not really recommending that you also keep the delineators because, I mean, we've heard the same comments that you all have. It's just that finding example photos, sometimes you have to take the ones that include the elements that you wish they didn't. So the precast concrete example photo there, we could put, the green and white striped delineators that say have the bike marking that we've put up in certain spots. We could put those on the end. We could put nothing on the end. They could just be painted yellow. That's kind of an option. It's not necessarily something that we're recommending with the precast curbs. It's just that was the best picture depicting those for this memo.
Perfect, thank you. No, I just didn't want to get deep into this when we start throwing some more of this in, and you kind of end up with a similar looking effect. And then we're having around 4, 5, 6, and 7 of this. So thank you.
I think Councilmember Toll and then Councilmember Clevenger.
I just wanted to say, again, I think if you don't do the intersection, the part that people complain about the most is still going to be there. If you don't address the intersection, you can't fix the intersection delineators with these precast curbs. You can only do that by moving forward with the curb islands or whatever choice that we make there. That's the only way to address the delineators where they're the most confusing in the intersection.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Question on these as far as like the narrow areas. When we're talking about from like Knox to Lynn or down there by Macon, as far as that area, not that far, but I mean like Knox to Lynn, what would you be using a cast iron? If we're talking about the slim curb, the cast curb, would we be using that in that area as well?
Yes, that's an area where you could use that.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Whatever option we do go with, kind of to Rick's point, anything that could be easily run over needs to be painted a bright color. If we're doing the cast curbs, they have to be visual. Otherwise, people won't see them. They'll run right over whatever curb is there. Sarah, I know that the bike rail we were talking about earlier is an expensive option, but it does seem like something that could be raised up even higher based on those bolt downs. I don't know if they only come in one height, but it could be brought up, painted. tailored to the needs. It's one of those things where people hate the way this looks so much, especially with the posts, the delineators, that I really would like to find a visually appealing replacement, with keeping an eye on the budget. But I don't think if we go cheap on this, it's going to look cheap and people are still going to be mad. So we need to find the right balance of aesthetics and cost. So if we could get some pricing on what that does look like, those bike rails, and if they have adjustable heights, what colors we could be looking at, just some mock-ups. I'd love to see that before we make a decision.
Just want to make sure I understand what you mean when you say bike rails, Councilmember.
Yeah, so if you go to that wide,
The proprietary yellow with the
Okay,
planter
gotcha.
box.
yeah, with
I got
the planter box picture, that yellow one.
Right. I
And
understand.
if there's a way to do it in a non-proprietary product as well, just throwing it out there.
Thank you. Councilmember Clevenger.
Just one other thing, as far as when we're looking at this, is it an option to look at, some of the islands that we've got now, the ones that, whether we're going to change them or not, and getting those ends painted yellow at least? Is that an option that anybody else is on the council is interested in looking at to make those more visible?
Certainly, that's just speaking for staff. That's something we can do fairly easily if you all are all good with that.
Yeah.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, just one comment on one of the delineators that we have already. If you get to a spot where they have to be eliminators, when you turn into the post office, the one's green, and it shows up when you hit a light on it. The other don't. The white ones don't. But what I think it says something about a bicycle on it. But anyway, whatever that is, if you're going to have one, that green really comes up. It might be what it's made out of. It's probably not just the paint, but it really shows up good at night.
Anything else on delineators? All right. So at this point, I'll point out that we're at 3 minutes to 7. You can continue with the work session if you like, or if you like, we can come back, and what staff could try to do is try to capture what we understand to be some of the discussion tonight, have that before you on January 5th for further discussion and perhaps some decisions for us. We still haven't talked too much about iron Hal queuing, and perhaps we could do that as well at the next work session. Would you like to end this work session at this point, Councilmember Smith?
Yeah, one final question on that. For the next discussion, could you bring what it might cost to have a turn signal there at on eastbound Armour at Iron? What adding a left arrow would look like cost-wise?
Jay, is that something that you all would be able to look at, do you think?
Yes, yeah, we could certainly do that.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else before you recess or adjourn from the work session?
Eric?
Yes.
I hate to jump in here, but if I could get about 3 to 4 minutes in between meetings so I can adjust a few things for broadcast.
Sure. Could we say 7:05, everybody, to begin the
recess, whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We'll consider it done. Thank you.